further sexual assaults and potentially worse. As I said, the investigators involved moved with urgency to identify and stop the alleged serial rapist before he victimized more women. We're asking our partners in the media, and this is one purpose we're here today, and the public at large, to share the pictures that we will provide of this individual, Ali Ghaffar, and ask that if you or know anyone who was victimized by this person, to please come forward and speak with law enforcement. We want to seek justice for anyone who was harmed and to help you, those people who might have been victimized, with services and support. The identified survivors have shown great courage and resiliency in standing up and speaking out. Their acts of strength likely prevented, almost certainly prevented, other women from suffering harm at the hands of this suspect. We will now fight alongside them for justice in the court system. This suspect, Ali Ghaffar, who was arrested on March 31st, was preying upon vulnerable women. His conduct was becoming more frequent and bold. State police investigators in my office and our local partners marshaled resources over mere hours and conducted an outstanding investigation, knowing that women remained at risk. This rapid and formidable deployment occurred to protect the public from further harm, and I am very proud and appreciative of all those involved. With respect to the specific facts, on Thursday, March 24th, at approximately 10 p.m., Mass State Police troopers from the Westfield Barracks contacted this office, the Massachusetts State Police Detective Unit assigned to the District Attorney's Office, to report that they located a lone female walking on the Mass Pike in West Springfield. When met by troopers, this female stated she had just been raped and threatened with a gun by an unknown male assailant. Troopers on scene called for an ambulance, and the survivor was transported to Bay State Medical Center. The survivor reported that she voluntarily got in a car in the area of Marble Street in Springfield, which was driven by this male subject, who she estimated to be in his early 20s with long hair and a dark complexion, who stopped and offered her a ride, which she then accepted. They drove towards the north end of Springfield, entered the highway towards Holyoke, and subsequently traveled to the area of Bear Hole Reservoir in West Springfield. At this point, the suspect informed her that he had a gun and proceeded to sexually assault her. Following the assault, the survivor was left in the wooded area alone, and the suspect fled. She was eventually found on the Mass Pike by Massachusetts State troopers. During the course of this investigation, members of the detective unit learned that the West Springfield Police Department had been investigating similar reported sexual assaults that occurred over the past 8 months. In each instance, the survivor was picked up in the city of Springfield and driven to a remote area of West Springfield where sexual assaults occurred. The dates of those incidents were March 4th, February 26th, February 19th, and January 16th of 2022, and July 29 and July 11 of 2021. From the disclosure of this rape on March 24th and the understanding of investigators that multiple similar sexual assaults had occurred at the hands likely of a single suspect, my office and its state police organized a multi-agency investigation that focused on the prevention of further harm to women in this area. On March 29th, a meeting was held for these purposes. Resources were deployed from the Hampden State Police Detective Unit, the SAFE Unit, Massachusetts State Police High Risk Victims Unit, and the Technical Services Unit, and the West Springfield Police Department and the Springfield Police Department. On Wednesday, March 30th, the West Springfield Police Department received a report of another sexual assault that occurred in the area of Bear Hole Reservoir. The survivor in this incident reported a similar experience as previous survivors. At approximately 8 p.m., she entered a car on Main Street and Marble Street in Springfield and was taken to Morgan Road in West Springfield to the Bear Hole Reservoir. The male suspect, whose description given was consistent with that of previous survivors with whom law enforcement spoke, raped her and left her at the scene. Survivor made her way to Morgan Road, and a resident in that area called for police. Detectives were able to identify through this investigation the suspect's car that the survivor was traveling in, and that was determined to belong to, Ali Ghaffar, age 20, of West Springfield. Through this process, detectives were able to identify another survivor from a reported sexual assault on the 19th of February, which again originated from the south end of Springfield. The March 30 and February 19 survivors were able to visually identify Ghaffar as the person who assaulted them. The following day, on Thursday, March 31, members of my SAFE unit, the Hampden State Police Detective Unit, Hampden County Narcotics Task Force, Massachusetts State Police High-Risk Victims Unit, West Springfield Police Department, and Springfield Police began to zero in on Ali Ghaffar. Surveillance teams were deployed, and they began trying to locate the suspect. At approximately 7:45 that evening, officers observed the suspect's car in the south end of Springfield while a female was entering the front passenger seat. Again, the suspect's car traveled to the Bear Hole Reservoir in West Springfield, where it came to a stop. Assembled law enforcement surveilling the suspect at this time approached the car and took Ghaffar into custody. In so doing, there is no doubt this team of investigators had stopped another rape before it could happen. Ghaffar was then taken to the West Springfield Police Department and initially charged for assaults on 2 survivors. Since the arrest of Ghaffar on March 31st, the previously mentioned law enforcement organizations continue their investigation, and more reports have come into police. On Saturday, April 2, in furtherance of the investigation and other charges, a DNA report from the Massachusetts State Police Crime Laboratory indicated that a DNA sample taken from Ghaffar was a match, a very likely match, to that of the sample taken from the survivor on March 24th. Again, the resources through this office and the Massachusetts State Police and its crime laboratory were leveraged in order to further an investigation in an incredible timeline. The request was made and a report was issued confirming the DNA match in a matter of about 3 days, which is extraordinarily quick. And again, that was all driven by the investigators here, the agencies here, and in the interest of protecting other women from this individual. Additionally, investigators were able to locate and re-interview the March 4 survivor who reported similar facts, as well as survivors from June 11 and July 29, and a survivor from February 26, all of whom provided investigators with significant information, all very similar to other survivors. Now, in total, Ali Ghaffar has been charged with 2 counts of rape, 4 counts of aggravated rape, 1 count of armed kidnapping with sexual assault, 1 count of assault with intent to rape, 4 counts of assault and battery with a dangerous weapon, 4 counts of kidnapping, and 4 counts of threat to commit a crime. The investigation continues into Ali Ghaffar. He is currently held without the right to bail, pending a dangerousness hearing scheduled for April 21st of this year. I ask the media and anyone watching with any information about this case to please contact the Massachusetts State Police assigned to my office with a particular phone number, 413-505-5993, or the West Springfield Police Department at 413-263-3210. You can also use the text-to-tip program by texting the word crimes, which is 274637, and type the word solve with a message with your tip. Again, I commend the law enforcement here, the investigators, the agencies who came together in an extraordinarily rapid timeline, who, again, spared women further assaults, and also for putting together a very quality case with evidence that will be used now going forward in court to prove these offenses and to find justice for the many victims of Mr. Ghaffar. Happy to take any questions.
So far, there's 6 women on the list. Do you believe there's how many more?
Yeah, that would call for some speculation. We don't really know that. We know that there's a somewhat lengthy timeline that Mr. Ghaffar engaged in these kinds of assaults. We know, quite frankly, he preyed on vulnerable women, women from a certain area in Springfield. So we know sometimes that these situations are not reported, and that women, particularly in these kinds of situations, would not be immediately willing to come forward to law enforcement. So for fear, for lots of reasons, and one of our objectives today is to let the public know and any other victims know that this individual is now held. Our anticipation and our efforts will be that he remains held, and that they be safe if they come forward and bring this information to law enforcement. But the idea that there may be more and how many, I'm not really sure. but we're hopeful that this information gets out there. If there are people who have been victimized, we want to seek justice for them, and we want to provide them with support and services around how they've been traumatized and victimized.
Going off of that, there's a big window, right? You had 2 incidents in July or June of last year, and then now these in the winter of this year. Is there a reason for that, or do we think that we're just missing maybe some victims in between that?
You know, through the investigation, that's what we know about. We don't know what we don't know. So we're hopeful that if there are other victims out there and there's other information, people might have seen things now that they connect to some of the information that's been made public, that we hear things. You know, whether it's just witnesses who have seen the car, have seen him, know things about him. Like any investigation, this is ongoing, and we're hopeful that any information that's out there will come to the knowledge of law enforcement.
What was that car?
It's a red Saab 9.3, 2007. In fact, it's actually a somewhat unique car. Saabs are no longer made. So, you know, if the car was seen in certain areas, if somebody has information about that, surely please report that to law enforcement. That could be of some assistance to us.
In your investigation, were all these incidents that you know about, all 6, in that Bear Hole Reservoir in Los Angeles?
There or close.
Do you know anything about this guy, priors or anything?
I can't necessarily speak about Corey, Patrick, but he's 20 years old. We know he lives in West Springfield. That's all I'm able to share at this point. I did want to open it up to my partners in law enforcement. I know the Deputy Colonel was happy to say a few words and answer any questions. The floor is yours.
On behalf of Colonel Christopher Mason, we like Crime Laboratory highlighted their forensic capabilities as well as their cooperation with local law enforcement, our state police detectives, and the district attorney's staff. Specifically, this case highlighted their ability to analyze evidence in a much more expedited manner, and which resulted in an arrest of this suspect. We appreciate the lab's work. I also want to highlight the collaboration between the Springfield Police, the West Springfield Police, the State Police High-Risk Victims Unit, the State Police Detectives assigned to the DA, the DA's staff, as well as our technical services and all the other resources that the State Police provided to this investigation. Without that, the suspect, we believe, would not be in custody, and because of that arrest, Hampden County is a much safer place. Thank you.
Touch base, just to comment on what was already said, that all law enforcement agencies come together to acknowledge the great work that they all did, from Lieutenant Marr's group, from Captain Gearing, Sergeant Savek, Sergeant Manser, Detectives Azadan, Arslan, Kevin Cady, all the way down. Everybody came together, worked together for one common goal, is to stop this, and as the DA said, from affecting the vulnerable women of our society, and that they have a voice through the DA's office and through law enforcement. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. And as the Chief just mentioned, you know, this individual is preying on really vulnerable people who often don't have a voice, and that's the reason we see through our work why offenders often prey on women or people dealing with addiction issues or mental health issues, or are just you know, underserved in our community because they feel they can get away with it. And the women who came forward and have participated to this point with law enforcement have shown incredible strength and have really spoken out in order to stop this individual. And I think the message is, as the Chief rightly noted, is this is not going to be tolerated, and anybody who's victimized in this society will be brought to justice, and we're going to empower those victims and survivors in order to speak for themselves and to this individual to come forward and to have trust in law enforcement that we will do our best to put them forward and to seek justice through the court system. I do want to acknowledge Brian Galvin from the High-Risk Victims Unit of the State Police, who's here. Their work is daily around these kinds of issues, and they really stepped in a very significant way to help with this investigation. So it was a very collaborative effort, and the relationships that we have here in Hampden County with the agencies involved and others really made this kind of quick, effective investigation possible. Any other questions?
Yeah, just a couple more facts real quick. You said that you stopped, obviously, what you believed to be a sexual assault before it happened. Was that someone you employed or someone you just happened to follow as he was committed?
So at the time, on that evening of March 31st, we had deployed multiple resources to surveil areas where this individual was known to be in pursuit of these kinds of rapes. We also attempted to establish surveillance of him, and in fact we did. And as I mentioned in the factual account, he was followed actually to the area of the South End where he picked up what we believe to be another victim. That car, his car, was followed over the bridge into the area of West Springfield where we knew the other sexual assaults had occurred. And the team at that point decided to move in before any sexual assault occurred on that particular woman. He was then arrested there on scene and charged initially with 2 offenses. And then the investigation really ramped up where we are now with the 6 victims who are the subject of the various charges.
You obviously have lengthy court proceedings ahead of you, but you listed a lot of charges there. Maybe some motivations for a victim who may be nervous to come forward. What is he facing if convicted?
He's facing life felonies. He's facing just about every charge is a serious felony with very high potential sentences. You know, our expectation is that you know, this is going to result in a lengthy prison sentence. At least that's going to be our objective. But there's a long way to go. But our point to any victims or survivors in the public who may be reluctant to come forward is this individual is going to be held for a period of time, that they're going to be safe, and that law enforcement is going to treat them with the respect and care that they deserve.
Anybody else?
Okay, thank you.